Brand new year, brand new ranked season, and a brand new Overwatch League season right around the corner. Huge news roundup today spanning the entire Overwatch community. First up, with the new ranked season, there is a new map rotation for competitive multiplayer. And this is something that I think we should pay more attention to because it kind of drastically affects how certain strategies go up or down in the metagame. Because when maps like Numbani, Eichenwald, Oasis, parts of Ilios, and Busan come into the mix, Dive starts to look a bit playable, especially coordinating around Pharah, but conversely on more long-range maps like Rialto and Havana, you're going to want to stick to double shield for sure, and even in some cases dropping Mei for double sniper. As always, we have a pretty strong meta comp in Overwatch right now, but because it takes skill and execution to play, whenever there's maps that create different engagement types, the off-meta strategies definitely have a window to create an opening to make plays, and the gap for that to be the case widens as you get farther and farther away from the highest tier of play. And before we move on, we'll show the whole map pool on screen again and just read out what we'll be playing for the next couple months. For the Assault maps, Temple of Anubis, Hanamura, Volskaya. Payload is Dorado, Rialto, Havana. Hybrid has Kings Row, Numbani, Eichenwald, and Control is Ilios, Oasis, and Busan. I have seen some chatter online that there's sort of mixed results with the map pool, because with limited maps, more likely that you're going to have to play the same one repeatedly, which can either get stale by itself or add insult to injury if you hate those given maps. And also as well, some may have preferred for an entire swap out of maps. Many of these returned from last season, Kings Row and Busan especially. But overall, I would say, based on my experience, that competency on how to play maps has definitely gone up due to a restricted pool. I, of course, want map vetoes or just a straight up map selection or draft or some sort of process to thin out the maps, but at the very least, having a smaller pool means that you have a couple months to play within it and get a grip on certain maps. I think it's a benefit, but I can also see why a lot of players aren't a huge fan. But I also think it's pretty important that if you know what the top meta is going to be, if you had the choice to select certain maps, you could somewhat artificially boost other playstyles just based on map selection alone and help outweigh that a little bit. As you may have expected, Jeff Kaplan did his yearly Yule log on Christmas, sitting in front of a fire doing not much really, spreading Christmas cheer, I guess, but every once in a while letting loose a few cute clips. The most impactful of them is this big hint to the Junkerqueen.
I wonder if the Queen is ever going to be a hero. What would she be? Would she be... She's not going to be support, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe she's a tank. She could be damage. Damage or tank would be cool.
I deem this one to be pretty obvious, and based on how the character has been talked about, I'd be willing to put money down that Junkerqueen would be one of the characters that gets released with Overwatch 2 in the big hero package that we should expect with that. Not really shocking news, but based on how cool the character seems, good news nonetheless when it finally rolls around in about a year or whatever it will be. Speaking of Jeff Kaplan news, this was a tweet from Neri, who somehow found these probably photoshopped, perhaps leaked images for an Overwatch classic. But when you start to add up some of the elements of this, it's pretty clearly a joke, I think. We see things like Symmetra's shield generator and Bastion's self-shield that he had like in beta, Tracer's quote controversial butt pose, but the most legit of all of them is this Jeff Kaplan Hanzo skin. It looks so cool. I hope that's actually a thing. Like, I'm 99% sure this is a whole Photoshop thing, but I think this would be the #1 skin in Overwatch ever if they actually did go ahead and make this. And it just looks so darn awesome and natural for Jeff Kaplan's face to be on Hanzo. All the other quote classic things I don't think would actually upgrade the game in any way. Personal shield on Bastion, shield gen, old res, a lot of this stuff many players didn't like. It's very easy to have rose-tinted glasses about this kind of thing. Although the concept seems like a very Blizzard type thing to do, as they just keep re-releasing games, and of course, World of Warcraft Classic did so well. I don't think this is something they're going to do, but perhaps some element of this may be mixed into the sequel. Like maybe there's game modes where you play old school Overwatch, but still, I kind of doubt it. Moving on now to Overwatch League news. There's been huge shakeups in the talent lineup for the league next year. Possibly the highest profile one is MonteCristo stepping down, who goes on to explain in a 12-tweet thread why he has decided not to re-up his contract. In the thread, he cites major creative differences that started to come up after Nate Nanzer left and is at great odds with the direction Overwatch League is heading down, stating that it was best for all parties for him to step down. He says that he won't be making Overwatch League content because there's not much demand for it. And if you're wondering if his casting partner Doa will be leaving as well, he did state on Twitter that he still believes in Owl and Overwatch's future. His contract is currently renegotiating, but seems to imply that he intends to re-up. So it is just Monty leaving, which is pretty crazy because him leaving League of Legends and sort of pioneering Overwatch esports to jumpstart it with momentum in terms of the talent being invested into the scene was a huge deal multiple years ago. And I always felt that it was critical that Monty was around to give Overwatch League his counsel and experience, obviously working in esports for so many years, which makes us wonder what may have been those creative differences that drove him away. Well, I look back to a fairly cryptic tweet I saw from Monty earlier in December, where he sort of foreshadows him leaving the Overwatch League, where he straight up puts up on blast the hiring of traditional sports producers that, quote, proved they knew nothing about our audience or medium, that being esports, and that power is rightfully beginning to return to the old kings of esports, assuming he means himself, of course. Monty hasn't announced what he's moving forward to, but I think this paints a pretty clear picture of the types of problems conceptually that he has with the Overwatch League, that it's being run by those who aren't into the gaming scene necessarily, but have seen success in traditional sports. And I think we all know it's just totally different, right? To get more specific on the types of things that you would assume Monty's talking about, esports writer Fion on Fire recalled a conversation he had with Monty, who at the time expressed how he wanted to feature players more in the Overwatch League and create more content and highlights around them. He quipped this to Nate Nanzer, saying that perhaps he's got the old Watch Points episode on a flash drive or something, but point being, I think the early 2018 Watchpoint episodes was something that I would assume Monty had some faith in because they were really well done. And if you don't remember, they were much more skit-based. And then moving on to the 2019 season, well, they just did Watchpoint live before and after the show without much production value and sort of a very minimal creative aspect to it, much more bare bones and straightforward. And it's safe to say that that's the type of change and reduction in investment that probably Monty was against. Another heavy hitter leaves the broadcast team as well. Puckett states in this Twitter video that he's moving back to New York with his girlfriend who got a job in the area and will not be re-upping his contract either. Puckett, like Monty, has a long storied history in esports. You could easily say he's one of the few that built the entire scene. And not only that, with his experience and technical proficiency in speaking, he added a lot of talent chops to the desk. And it sucks to wrap up the video this way because earlier in the week prior to that, we got what seemed to be good news, but now kind of loses the air out of the sails, I think, that both Custa and Jake will be retiring as pro players to join in as casters and analysts for the Overwatch League, Jake casting and Custa on the desk, which I think is a huge boon because not only are these players well-spoken, they'll add an extra layer of depth of understanding of the game, as well as just the experience of being a pro, playing those long hours, the team dynamics, and things that are a little bit more difficult to obtain for the commentators that haven't been pro players. So with any luck, they'll be able to carry the weight of the vacuum that's left with MonteCristo leaving, but perhaps there is more than meets the eye with changes that are coming next year. I mean, we don't know what the broadcast is going to be like, and maybe there's even more changes Monty disagreed with, not just Watchpoint getting minimalized. Who knows what's going to be? Keep in mind that Overwatch League 2020 kicks off in just a month. It starts on February 8th, and that's where the rubber hits the road with the big experiment that this global league is attempting. Keep in mind that the structure of it will be there is regional homestands that will occur each weekend, hosted at a different location spanning the entire globe. And because of that, the time schedules are going to be all over the place. And whereas previously the Overwatch League had a very heavy North American bias with how everything was scheduled. Now it's going to be split across every time zone imaginable, basically, with Europe probably still getting the short end of the stick, if I had to just guess based on the distribution of teams. But I assume that the Overwatch League plans on the rewind feature where they replay a old broadcast to sort of carry the time zone problem, but I'm not so sure it will, and more than likely we're going to see some huge drops in active viewership of the Overwatch League, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it hurts the league as a whole, because as long as the homestands are selling out, the structure of the league still stands. But the league had made such a big deal about their concurrent viewer base, garnering them the Twitch broadcast deal that I believe also is coming up due, meaning that there's a chance that we see Overwatch League on Mixer or something, or whoever's the highest bidder, or whoever's even willing to bid at this point. It'll be interesting how all of this pans out. Moving on to hacker news, aim hacks in Overwatch have been a growing problem, so much so that recently a competitor in the second iteration of the Breakable Barriers tournament named WoW was caught red-handed with the cheats, called out on Twitter, with many of the pros and former pros in that event claiming that the clips were indeed suspect, and then Blizzard did go ahead and ban this player and their team from the tournament. Cheating in Overwatch has been sort of a murky discussion, because you would think that with so much money on the line that somebody in the Overwatch League would try to cheat, right? The fact that we haven't caught anyone cheating is sort of an anomaly considering how prevalent it is in other esports. Now, this player in particular in this event wasn't really trying to mask the hacks, and for a keen player, there are ways that you can sort of hold back your superpowers in order to sort of make it difficult to identify whether you're cheating or not. Unfortunately, I don't have any words of wisdom or ways to combat this issue myself, other than the fact that it's a growing community problem that Blizzard's going to have to put in some work in order to try to stave this off, because for a while, Overwatch was very secure against cheats, and it just seems as the game has grown and perhaps the code has gotten more complex over time, it's been easier for hackers to slip in and find exploits. This typically is the benefit of having a more closed game system, and games that are much more open and easily tampered with, like CSGO, typically had way worse cheating than a game like Overwatch, but I feel like over time, that's starting to level out, where they're both pretty bad. Perhaps some good news for a change. A Overwatch fan and app developer named Huggos developed a phone notification app for role queue, meaning that you'll be able to multitask without being AFK at the start of the game. And on this long Reddit thread, it explains how you can set everything up. It's an add-on to Discord. I haven't used this myself. I don't know if it's trustworthy, so don't get mad at me if this turns out to be some big phishing scheme, but I have seen it shared around a little bit, and I'm interested to see if this is something that works really well. If it does work, it would be pretty darn cool. My sort of life hack for queuing in Overwatch is that I have a wireless headset, which allows me to walk around the house and still hear if the queue pops, but short of having that, walking around the house with your phone probably fits with most people's lifestyle and current gear. There's that. Another interesting Overwatch news story is that on the Korean servers, over 7,000 players were punished or suspended for toxicity. Now, of course, the post itself is in Korean, and I tried to use Google Translate to see what was up with this. Based on the translation, it seems that this banning wave is going one step beyond just silencing the players, which is a typical Overwatch move where they let you play the game, they just chat ban you, so you can't use voice or text chat. But if you're a player found to repeatedly cause offenses with that, you won't be able to access the game. The offenses they seem to be cracking down on are abusive language, gameplay sabotage, going AFK, things like that. What's interesting to me with all this is 7,000 players feels like a really high number. Like, how many players in South Korea exist currently, actively? I have to imagine that's actually a pretty big percentage. Like, are there 100,000 active players? Is there a million? We don't really know. I'm not familiar. I don't play on those servers, but judging by the Overwatch NAQ times, I can sort of guesstimate what the active player numbers are. And at least from where I'm sitting, 7,000 seems kind of high. But take that with a grain of salt and conclude what you will. It'll be interesting to see if this is something that they deal with in the other regions as well. Last news story of the video, Von Hold on Twitter spent a year creating this Overwatch fan-made comic. For those of you who miss the comics coming out in a rapid succession, I suggest you check it out. The artwork on them is definitely really cool, and it's just a short 4-tweet thread if you want to check it out. This, as well as all of our sources for today's video, will be linked in the description for your reference. But that's going to be everything for today's news wrap-up video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you actually get notified when our videos go live. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.